All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswata Deve Gauravani Prachadane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatchadesha Tadane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasri Gaur Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 1, Chapter 16, verse 8. Nakasha mriyate tavad yavad asta ihantakaha. Translation. As long as Yamaraj, who causes everyone's death, is present here, no one shall meet with death. The great sages have invited the controller of death, Yamaraj, who is the representative of the Lord. Living beings who are under his grip should take advantage by hearing the deathless nectar in the form of this narration of the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. Purport: every human being dislikes meeting death, but he does not know how to get rid of death. The surest remedy for avoiding death is to accustom oneself to hearing the nectarian pastimes of the Lord as they are systematically narrated in the text of Srimad Bhagavatam. It is advised herein, therefore, that any human being who desires freedom from death should take to this course of life as recommended by the rishis headed by Shonaka. Translation: as long as Yamaraj, who causes everyone's death, is present here, no one shall meet with death. The great sages have invited the controller of death, Yamaraj, who is the representative of the Lord. Living beings who are under his grip take advantage by hearing the deathless nectar in the form of this narration of the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. So here, Shonaka Rishi has brought up the topic of Yamaraj and how if Yamaraj is present, then we escape from death, because Yamaraj is in charge of punishing people, and if he's very pleased by appearing before people, then they're protected from death. But then the question is, how can we please Yamaraj? So the method here is to glorify the Lord. If you glorify the Lord, then Yamaraj is very pleased, because he's a devotee. So he comes and he's present, and he wants to hear the glorification of the Lord. So if the Lord is present and you glorify the Lord, then there's no death in the one sense of the term. In other words, Yamaraj doesn't punish you in any way. So, in other words, if this topic that was raised, why did Parikshit not kill the Sudra who was imitating a king and beating the cow and the bull? So then they said, well, if it's concerning the Lord, let us hear about this topic. If it's not about the Lord, we don't want to hear about it. So this is just an extension of the idea that this topic probably is going to be about the Supreme Lord, so that's it's very nice to hear. And hearing is always good, because we're protected from the, hearing about the Lord is good because we're protected from death, because Yamaraj will be here and be helping us. So, of course, normally, as Prabhupada points out in the purport, nobody likes death. Yeah? and therefore he's depicted in a very ferocious manner. We have the description of the Yamadutas coming to get Ajamil. And he, of course, was a criminal. But he was afraid of these ferocious creatures who were coming to grab him with ropes. So that's just the Yamadutas, the servants of Yamaraj. And we see that in the Western world they depict death personified as a very ferocious creature also. Sometimes he's got a sickle in his hand, and he's the death reaper. So he's coming along, and then gradually he's cutting everybody down and taking them to the abode of death or whatever. So very fearful type of creature in general. So that's the case of most people. Nobody likes death. Nobody volunteers to die. And everybody is struggling to prevent death. They want to continue their life. That's the normal position for people. So death is not an abstraction. There's also a personality involved. Of course, there is physical death where all your cells don't cooperate and they stop functioning and your organs stop functioning and then you die. But then what causes that? So in the modern world there's a science. Why do people die? And they try to figure out by looking at your cells and this and that and why they disintegrate, and they can't quite figure out why it happens. Why can't we just keep repairing yourselves like you repair yourselves during your lifetime, you grow and you're not dying when you're growing up. So why can't we just continue this process of doing, but somehow things start falling apart after a while, as if it's just inevitable that it must happen. But nobody can really explain why. So of course they say we lack this chemical or that chemical or this happens or that. Nobody really knows. But it seems somehow it's like inbuilt into our genetics or something that we're bound to die. So from a broader point of view, of course, we know that yes, everybody has a lifespan, and that's according to karma that we get the lifespan. So there's going to be some arrangement by which you're going to die sooner or later. And even if we're not human beings, but we're on heavenly planets as a devata, still, devatas also die. And even if you're at the top of the universe with a very, very subtle body made out of Mahatattva or something like Brahma, the body is so fine nobody can see it, so it's so subtle. But he also has to die. He has to give up his body. Disintegration is there. So it's inevitable. Somehow it's built into the universe, and ultimately we understand that the creation of the universe and the destruction is under the supervision of the Supreme Lord. He doesn't have to do it directly, but he has his servants or his managers supervising everything to make sure it happens. Everything in the world is temporary. You cannot have a permanent situation. All you can do is negotiate for a better deal, less suffering, or longer lifespan. But nevertheless, you have to have a lifespan. Everyone in the material world has got karma, so they got a lifespan. You can get less problems or more problems in your life. That's how you can negotiate. So if you're lucky and you negotiate properly, then you get longer lifespan, better health, etc. And if you're a fool, then you get lesser and lesser and lesser lifespans and lots of suffering. Of course, nobody knows how to negotiate properly. So that's why it's all haphazard and that people struggle. So the Vedic literature tells us how to negotiate properly. That means you have to understand the law of karma, and you have to prevent the activities which are going to create the short lifespan and the short suffering, or the lots of suffering. So that is no bad karma. So what is bad karma? Well, what is bad actions? That means sinful actions. And what is sinful action? That means violent action. Now the problem is, Bhagavatam says, one living entity lives off another living entity. That's just the nature of the strange nature of the material world. So the animals live off the plants, animals live off animals, basically. So there's going to be violence. To maintain a body, a human being has to have some sort of violence. Okay, so what do? We get karma for all these acts we do, but at least we can minimize the violence. So that's what is permitted in the Vedic literature. Yeah? Violence is unavoidable, but we minimize the violence. Then we get less problem. We can't avoid the problem. As I said, everybody dies, everybody gets some problem, but we can minimize it. Yeah? So we minimize the suffering by minimizing the sinful activities or the violent activities we do. That's all we can do. And we can counter that by doing opposite activities. Instead of giving suffering to other living entities, we help living entities. So that's another way of compensating. One is minimize the suffering, the other is increase the happiness of other living entities. So then we get this concept of papa, or sin, which is the violent activities, and the punya, the pious activities, the charitable activities. Yeah? So you minimize the sin, increase the piety, then you get better life. So that's the principle behind the law of karma. It does not work for the animals because they can't think, what is a pious activity or what is a sin. They don't know anything about that. They can't judge. But human beings can. So they become responsible and they get the karma. They get results for their activities in this way. So the human being, therefore, can negotiate a better life and a better future life by following that principle, avoiding the sinful, violent activities, minimizing it, and increasing the punyas. So that's what the karma yoga and karma kanda is for in the Vedas, to let you live comfortable life on earth and minimize your suffering. And you can maximize that and live for thousands of years as a Devata or as Lord Brahma, if you so choose. Then you have to do very particular activities of punya for that, or pious activity for that. So that's the system that is set up, and Yamaraj is there to take the persons who do the sinful activities and start judging them and see what type of result they should get for their bad karmas, their sinful activities. And if it's very bad, then he puts them in a hellish planet, and they get all sorts of punishment in their subtle body. And after that's over, then he puts them back in a body which may be a human body, or maybe an animal body, or maybe a plant body. Okay? So that's what Yamaraj does. He's the judge. Yeah? He has to see all your karmas and then judge what the next life should be based upon all the karmas you've done in previous lifetimes, including the last life. Huh? Yeah. So he doesn't create the death in one sense. We create our own death. And we create our own future, but he's the one that judges exactly all the details of what should happen. Huh? Just like we have, in a country, we have laws. And people should follow the laws. And then some people don't follow the laws, so they get caught. But then there's a judge there. So the judge is there because the law is not mechanical. Yeah? So many circumstances are there. So it's up to the judge finally to give the final punishment. Yeah, maybe you get 1 year in jail, or 2 years in jail, or 5 years in jail, or maybe you don't even go to jail, but you get some fine or whatever. That's up to the judge, depending on the circumstances. So the crimes are not all the same. There could be a theft, but it could be different for different reasons with different results and with different motives. So therefore, the judge has to decide, and based on that, he will give the punishment. So that's exactly what Yamaraj does. He has to judge all of your activities and see just if it's worthy of great punishment or less punishment or no punishment, depending on the frequency of your sins, the ill intentions of your sins, and whatever like this. But like the ideal government system, the idea is not simply to punish people, and get some joy out of seeing them suffer, the idea is to try to correct them, rectify them, give them a lesson so they don't do the same activity again. Just like if you have a child, sometimes they're very naughty, so you have to punish them a little bit with the hope that they won't do that activity again. In other words, they correct themselves. So that's exactly what Yamaraj is there for. That's what the government is there for also, to not simply to punish people, but try to correct them and make them follow properly. So that's what the karma is there for, to teach us certain lessons. But we know that, unfortunately, many people go to jail and they come out and they just commit another crime. They don't learn any lesson from it. Some do, very good. Some don't. And they continually go back to jail and whatever. I just read something that somebody was let out of jail because of coronavirus like that. He was in jail for something or other. He got out and then immediately the next day he killed somebody. He just went out and killed somebody the next day after he got out. So some people don't learn by the punishment. So that's the case also with people in this world. They don't learn their lesson. Therefore, when they come back in this lifetime and they get some bad karma, they don't understand and appreciate that they've created that situation for themselves. And therefore they blame everybody else. And they become violent with everybody else. So they're just increasing their bad karma by doing that. And therefore, they go to Yamaraj again, and they get more bad karma in the next lifetime, and they go down and down in this way until they're no longer capable of being a human being, and they become an animal or a plant. So that's unfortunate. So before that happens, there is the hope that in one of these lifetimes, a person who is in a miserable position due to karma, that he'll realize, oh, yeah, I've created this situation. Therefore, I've got to change how I do my activities. Yeah? So that's the true purpose of the punishment of Yamaraj, to make people realize that they have to change themselves and stop doing all of the violent activities and have compassion for other living entities. And that much they have to do. So this is the long process of training, because unfortunately the living entities as human beings are not too intelligent and very stubborn, and therefore it takes a long, long time for them to learn anything. So they go through many, many births before they learn one little lesson and change a little bit like that. So that's the problem with many human beings. So anyway, it gives continual chance to the living entity. Because we get continual births, we get continual karma, and therefore we can keep learning through these experiences birth after birth. But if we don't face that fact, then we'll continue to suffer and suffer and suffer in the material world. So Yamaraj has his duty to perform. In one sense, maybe it's not a good duty, a comfortable duty, just like Maya is in charge of the material world. And then Maya is described in Bhagavatam. Maya is behind the Lord. She's not in front of the Lord. Doesn't want the Lord to see her because she's ashamed of her activity of directing the material world for all the jivas, to give them happiness and distress in the material world. Ultimately, it's not a good situation for living entities, but she has to do that because that's what the jivas want. So Yamaraj also is in this position of meting out the justice to the living entities according to their good activities or bad activities. He has to do that to the best of his ability. So we can't blame Yamaraj for anything. We can't blame the judge also in the law court. He's just doing his duty of looking at the law, how serious your crime is, and then giving a judgment. So that's what Yamaraj is doing. And then you get your punishment accordingly. The other misfortune, besides not understanding the law of karma and taking responsibility for their acts, is that people don't even know what death is. And that's why they're afraid of it, because they don't know what it is. They just know that they're not going to be there anymore. So everybody wants eternal life, and it seems to stop at the point of death. So that's why they fear it. Okay? That's the position of most people in the world. As I mentioned previously, we have, avidya or ahankara. Avidya, that's the first stage, ignorance. Then we get asmita, which is material identity with our body. Ahankara. Then we get raga and dvesha. I like this, I don't like that. Hatred, desire, hatred, dualities like that. And then the last stage is abhinivesh. Complete absorption in life and a fear of death as a result of that. We want to keep living with this body, and we don't want to end the body. And so we fear death. So that's the common characteristic of the human being. And therefore this is described here, that everybody's afraid of death. And yet it comes to everybody. So in one sense, nobody can be happy. Only the fool can be happy, because everybody knows they're going to die sooner or later. We try to compromise that. I gave that example previously of the man hanging upside down under the tree over the pit with the snake at the bottom and the animals trying to bite him. So their death is going to come sooner or later. The little rats are going to nibble at the vine, and he's going to fall into the pit, and he's going to die. But he's very happy. Why? Because he gets the honey. So people get distracted in this lifetime. If they get a little pleasure for their senses, then they forget sooner or later they're going to have to die. But it's a very artificial thing. They have to face it sooner or later they're going to die. So that's the position of people in this world. And on the other hand, as these verses are stating, no fear of Yamaraj. You don't have to be afraid of Yamaraj. Of course, one is you don't die anyway because you're not the body, which is the first instruction of Krishna to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. Fundamental principle of spiritual life. You're the soul, you're not the body, so you don't die. You're eternal. And what happens? You go to body because of karma. That's all. So you don't have to fear death because it's only the body that's dying, and that's not you. The anxiety, of course, is that what's the next body? So then you have to accept that law of karma, that according to my activities I'm going to get my next body, and if I don't get a proper body, I'm going to have to suffer more. So that's the fear. And then the solution is understand how the law of karma works. If I do more sinful activities, I'm going to have more suffering in the future. My body, my next body, and the next body are going to be miserable. And if I avoid the sinful activities, more punyas, then I get a comfortable body. So at least that much a person should understand if he's intelligent. So one, except we're not the body, we're the soul. Second, the soul goes from body to body. Second thing. Third thing, law of karma operates. Therefore, we should avoid the sin and do the punyas. So that's basically as far as karma yoga goes. And then you can live comfortably in this life, go get another better body in Svargaloka next lifetime, or higher planet, whatever, according to your punyas. So in any case, no need to fear the punishment of Yamaraj. If we're following all the nice laws properly, we don't get punished. Just like in a country, if you follow the laws, you don't get punished. If you avoid the sinful activities as much as possible, whatever, you also don't get punished. You don't have to fear Yamaraj, and rather you get the rewards. So that's one level of understanding things. The next point here, of course, is that we can avoid the sinful activities, do the punyas, but here we find another principle operating. One can please Yamaraj somehow or other very easily. And how is that? You attract him because he's a devotee. So you do devotional activities. And then Yamaraj is pleased. So in this case it is here, discuss the topics of the Lord. Glorify the Lord. And then Yamaraj will come and he'll start listening also, because he likes to hear the glorification of the Lord, topics of the Lord, which is what Bhagavatam is. So therefore, if you hear Bhagavatam and discuss Bhagavatam and glorify the Lord through Bhagavatam, then Yamaraj is very happy. Yamaraj is here and he's not going to cause any problems for you. He's happy. He's not going to be angry at you and give you some bad punishment or whatever. So what this means is that if we do bhakti, we're saved from Yamaraj and his wrath, or that fearful aspect of Yamaraj with the Yamadutas coming with their ropes to pull you out of the body and punish you, or with the death with his sickle there coming and cutting you apart or whatever like that. No fear like that at all. Yamaraj becomes very friendly, smiling. Yeah? So in other words, we are saved from this whole fearful position of the material world with its impermanence and death and inevitability of death. So here the process is glorifying the Lord, hearing about the Lord. So it says Hari Lilamritam Vacha, words which are very sweet. And the sweetness is caused because they are describing the pastimes of Krishna. These are the sweet topics. Now we have many topics of the Lord, like the creation and destruction of the material. Well, that's also Hari Lila. That's a pastime of the Supreme Lord. But the sweeter pastimes of the Lord are the pastimes of the Lord in the spiritual world, where he's just in association with his devotees. And the sweetest pastimes of all are the pastimes of Krishna, which are described in the 10th canto. So they are sweetest because they involve the Lord with the devotees, and how he interacts with the devotees, how the Lord responds to the devotee's affection, and how the devotee shows his affection for the Lord. So the Lord is always very surprising on how he responds to the devotees in different ways. So that gives rise to the sweetness. So that is one way in which we can avoid death. We hear and glorify the pastimes of Krishna. And then Yamaraj, very, very happy, very pleased, and he doesn't touch you. A simpler way, of course, is the name of the Lord. And we see how that operated even in the case of someone like Ajamil, who's not even a devotee. He just uttered the name, not even understanding it was Vishnu or whatever. And Yamadutas couldn't touch him at all. He also escaped from death. However, this happened because the instruction of the Lord to the Vishnu Dutas was, if anybody chants the name of the Lord, then he's protected. So the Vishnu Dutas come and protect him from the Yamadutas. So in other words, the Lord himself, not just Yamaraj is pleased if you chant, but Supreme Lord is pleased if you chant the name of the Lord. And he sends his servants there to protect you from anybody else. So we get double, not just the Yamaraj coming and being pleased, but we get these servants of Vishnu himself coming and being pleased. So that's just even accidental chanting of the name. So that story actually is told in the context of the 6th canto of Bhagavatam, and Vishnu Chakravarti says that is an example of Poshana, one of the topics of the Bhagavatam after Sthana, which was the geography of the universe. So the Lord creates the universe, creates the bodies for the living entities, creates the places for the living entities on Bhumandala and Svargalok or hellish planets or whatever. That's 5th canto. And then the Lord does not abandon the jivas. He also is merciful to them in the material world, even if they're stupid or erring or full of ignorance or whatever. Somehow he doesn't abandon anybody. So to give an example of that, therefore we have the story of Ajamil, Poshana, protection of the Lord. In this case, it's not even a devotee. Of course, the Lord protects the devotee, but this is not even a devotee. It's someone who accidentally chants the name of the Lord. He also gets protected by the Lord. So that's the power of the name of the Lord. So this is a way in which we can also avoid the problem of death, simply by chanting the name of the Lord. We invoke the mercy of the Lord. So Ajamil did that, but that was accidental. So if one chants with devotion, with good intention of pleasing the Lord, and of course if we do it with pure bhakti, where we're not trying to do it to get something from the Lord, we're doing it out of full devotion, unconditional love for the Lord, or whatever attempt we make for that, even if it's not pure, still, that's even more attractive to the Lord. So that's the sadhana that we do. Following Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we're doing pure bhakti, uttama bhakti. So when we call the name of the Lord, our intention is simply to please the Lord and glorify the Lord. So that is very attractive to the Lord. Very, very powerful process. So we cannot underestimate the power of that for invoking the Supreme Lord. So more than simply getting protection from death or whatever, not getting punished by Yamaraj, chanting with devotion gives us something else. We get the direct mercy of the Lord, by which we can get to the spiritual world. That's a higher reward, actually, a higher goal. We can associate and live with the Supreme Lord eternally. That's the goal of bhakti. So that's accomplished through bhakti, and particularly by chanting his name. So that's the highest protection, poshana, so to speak. So we chant in the name, but we chant it with great devotion. Okay. Any question?
So Yamaraj is like the judge of the sinful activity or the pious activity. Is that only in regards to like Bhakti Varsha? Because I heard that like Earth is the only place where you have like fruitive activities, and then is it all Blue Mandala?
Well, actually, everybody dies, so everybody has to, if they do sinful activity, there's going to be some judgment on that. But we call the earth, particularly Varsha, as karma bhumi. It's commonly described like that because this is the place where we can do punyas and we can go upwards, or we do sins and we go downwards to hellish planets. And then once you're in the heavenly planet or in the hellish planet, you live your life there and you wear up the punyas or the sin, and then boom, you come back to the earth planet, and then you start doing your activities as a human being on earth, and then you do that. So that's, relatively speaking, from our point of view, that's how we operate as human beings. But we should not think that the devatas don't do activities and don't get results for their activities, obviously. We just walk on the street and we're doing a karma by stepping on a bug or whatever. We get some karma for that also. So heavenly planets, they're doing activities all day long, which is a longer day than our day, obviously, but they're doing all sorts of activities, and they're responsible also for the results, and they die, they get another body due to karma. But if a human being is doing particular karmas to get to Svargaloka, then he can stay in Svargaloka as long as those karmas that he did on earth are valid. And then when it runs out, then plop, he's finished and he has to go down. So that's an exhaustion of his good karma, so to speak. So he's enjoying the results of his karma up there, then he's coming back here. But of course that Devata also is doing activities also, and he's also getting karmas for that when he's up there. So he's responsible for his acts also. So it's not that they don't have any karma. But from our point of view, we're expending our karmas up there, then coming back again.
So a devata, they can
You can go higher and higher and higher. It's called Krama Mukti. And even some devotees do that. They're kind of mixed devotees. They got a little material attachment. They can go to Svargaloka, then they can go from there to a higher planet, higher planet, higher planet, like that. Then they can go to Goloka from, or to Vaikuntha from Brahmaloka even. They can promote that way. Others, yogis also, can do Krama Mukti and go through the higher planetary systems, and they get impersonal liberation.
And Yamaraj is also watching the higher planetary systems.
Somebody is. I don't know whether it's him or not, but somebody's doing it. Because they can fall from there also, and then, whatever. So there's an account for everybody's karma in the material world. But obviously in higher planets there's much less sinful activity, because it's very sattvic and more sattvic, and most sattvic as we get up there. And as we go down, it becomes earth planets, a mixture, and then down below is worse.
Is there, on Jambudvip, there's the Bharata Varsha is different than the other Varshas?
Yeah.
Is there a description of the other Varshas and the other Dvipas?
Yeah.
Is there other Varshas that are like Bharata Varsha?
Yeah.
And the other Dvipas?
Well, each Dvipa has its own divisions. We have 9 divisions here, but we can't go to those places. Those are considered, they're called Bhoma Svarga, or heavenly places on the earth level, not upper Svargaloka sphere, but down on earth. So in other words, it said that the Devatas, when they exhaust their punyas, and they end up there on those other varshas, other provinces or states within the Jambudvip itself, and they can get better enjoyment there. So in other words, it's better than our place. And then we have the Dvipas. They also have divisions within them, but we don't have too much description of that. A little description is given in the Bhagavatam, not too much. And there's different kings there ruling also. And it's also quite heavenly compared to Bharat Varsha. And it's also said that Bharat Varsha is where we get the Yuga cycles. We don't get them any other places. Satya, Treta, Dwarpa, Kali operates in Bharat Varsha. So not on the other Varshas and not on the heavenly planets.
You mentioned how Ajamil, he didn't know who Vishnu was, and but I read that he was a Brahmin before becoming a
Well, he may have some familiar with it, but he was not doing bhakti for him. He had no real idea when he named his son that I'm pleasing Vishnu by that. He didn't think like that. He just, it's a name, I'll name him Narayan, so he named him Narayan. He just called Narayan's name, and he wasn't thinking of Vishnu really when he was doing that.
But he did a lot of, like, for example, he grew up in a
Brahmin family.
He did a lot of punya before.
In some sense, but we could say that maybe that was not so good for him, because how did he become so sinful suddenly? So it's not necessary. He could be worshipping some devatas out of duty, studying the Vedas or whatever like that, or he could have been a lower Brahmana who actually didn't study the Vedas too much because he just was Brahmin by birth, but and somehow he wasn't very strong because he got tempted and then he became very sinful. So whatever training he got was not too useful for him because he ended up in a very miserable position.
Because I read something about Ajamil, the devotee was writing something, I can't really remember where I read that, saying that actually what happened to him at the end, it was a mixture between his past punya and his sincerity in chanting the name. It was not just out of the blue that he...
Oh, well, the example was given of Ajamil is he had no sincerity, he had no faith. So he just named his son Narayana, that's all. And he was calling out his son Narayana. And that was his punya. But he wasn't intentionally trying to do it also as a punya, because he was very sinful. He didn't believe in punyas or anything.
So this devotee was saying that actually, because he said in the Bhagavatam that in order to chant the name of God, or to repeat in any way, even offensive, you have to have a lot of punya accumulates. accumulated.
Well, that's a little bit of a contradiction because the demons are chanting the names. They don't have any punya, but they are chanting the name of Krishna in hatred or whatever. So I don't think we can call that a punya for them.
I mean, like the demons who were...
Sisupala, for instance.
But they do have a history of some...
Hatred.
That was one of the...
They would aparad against the Lord, I guess. That I don't know what. Probably all the punyas would get cancelled out by their aparads.
But I mean, he was. You said the other day that he was
yeah, another demon. Another demon. Three times he was a demon. Of course, he got the association of the Lord and got killed by the Lord. That was his punya, I suppose. But you know, he wasn't. He didn't do any punyas in the other sense of counteracting sinful activities or doing it of compassion for people or whatever.
And another question that I have is, it seems like punya and papa, sinful and pious activities connected to what we do to others, isn't it? If we are good to others or bad to others.
Yeah.
What about people who are, if they don't treat themselves nice, like for example, they overeat or they harm themselves, like Kali Yuga, self-harming views and things like that. So does that get also some...
Well, it's a problem because we do have rules for personal conduct. What you eat, how you conduct yourself individually, not even in relation to others, so just how you survive in this world, how you conduct yourself and whatever. And you're supposed to read scriptures and do this and meditate or whatever, and you don't do that, then it's considered a sin also. So these are for your personal things. So there's sins concerning the self also, rules of conduct for yourself, and you don't follow. They're just somewhat related to other people, but more it's for your self-cultivation, so purify your mind, etc. You don't follow them, then it's considered sinful, and then you may degrade yourself because you're not following.
You mentioned that Yamraj, the Lord of Death, he doesn't touch even someone who has really young aparat like Ajamil. So what happens to...
He had no aparad, it was namabas. Yeah.
So what about devotees who haven't become fully purified and death occurs, so where do they go? Because they're not going to Yamaraj or judgment, they in some place come back and finish up their devotional life.
Yeah, so most devotees then, they don't have to get sinful reactions or sinful punishments or whatever, and if they don't do any aparad, then whatever devotional progress they have made continues, and then next lifetime they continue from that point. If they're at Nishta, then they end up having Nishta next lifetime, and they get to Ruchi and Asakti like that. So they continue the devotional service. Wherever, it could be on this earth planet, or we don't know where it is, it's Krishna's arrangement.
I was just wondering, Yamaraj, if this has a focus of correction, but we kind of forget the correction when we take on another body. Could you speak about that?
Yeah. Well, as I said, we're slow learners. It doesn't only apply to Yamaraja now. We forget the previous activities we've done, and we don't understand that it's karma now. But even in this lifetime, we don't usually take the correction. Well, we do something, we make a mistake, we suffer the result, and we don't learn, and we do the same mistake again, and we suffer again, and we still do the same thing again. So this is some part of human nature is like that we don't learn from our mistakes. So that's maybe say lower consciousness when we're in Tamagun and Rajagun. As you go up, then you have a little more introspection, and therefore you learn easier. And when you're in Sattvagun, you learn very easy. And in fact, you just look at everybody else and you can learn from their example. You don't even have to do it yourself. That's bad, I'm not going to do that. So, but if you're in the lower modes, generally, because of the ignorance, it was very hard for us to take lessons. But it may be the only way also. eventually. Experience is the lesson giver for many people. If you're more intelligent, you can look from other people, or you can get from scripture, and then you follow. If you don't, then you have to learn the hard way, by experience, by punishment, whatever.
So, I haven't read the descriptions of what happens in the hell. I assume there's some pretty severe punishments. So there must be something inherent in the jiva. You spoke last night that the jiva dharma is that prema.
Yeah.
So then when you give the jiva the opposite, like complete fear, and then it kind of shocks it into wanting, like if you give it an aversion, it shocks it back in the other direction, so to speak. Like how does the correction happen through punishment?
Oh, well, it's like in the material world. It works on some people, doesn't work on other people. So they go to jail, they come out, and it works, and they don't do any more sinful activity. Others, they come out, they do more sinful activity. And then they go back to jail. And then they get out maybe. And then they go do more sinful activity. So they keep getting punishment like that, and that's why some people degrade, and they end up not even being a human being, they end up as an animal. And then they don't get any karma anymore. They still get the results of their previous karmas, but as an animal, they're not responsible anymore for their acts, so they can't accrue anything. So it's a little holiday for them in one sense, in a lower body like that. They don't have to think too much at all. But as a human being, we have the capacity to do, so therefore we keep getting karma for that.
I imagine there will come a point where all the jivas will become reborn.
Well, not necessarily. We say anadi karma, and no beginning, no end. We just keep going on. And you can, hopefully, you won't, because the Lord sends devotees, he comes as avatar, there are scriptures, etc. So he gives opportunities. Hopefully people will take advantage, but it's not inevitable that everybody will.
It's interesting that, I find it interesting that piety is eternal, material energy is
Yeah,
eternal.
yeah.
So does that imply that we'll eventually reach a point of like perfection and maintaining material energy in the heavenly worlds?
Huh?
Like there must be a highest peak to material energy, and I'm guessing everything's moving in that direction to eventually maintain the highest.
Well, yeah, no, unfortunately, Prakriti is one thing and Jiva is another thing. So Prakriti gives you the situation, and we got finer levels of material energy up until Brahmaloka. And then, of course, finer levels are not accessible to us. That's only at Pralaya that everybody ends up in Prakriti. But then their karmas don't disappear then. The karmas remain with them, and even if they're in Mahavishnu sleeping for some times, all their previous karmas are still waiting for them. And when they come out and go in another universe, then all the karmas come back again. So a living entity within the material world, he can go up out somewhere, but then it's a fragile situation because we can always do sinful activities and fall from that position again and go downwards like this. So you go to Svargaloka, then you come back to Earth, you do Earth, then you go down to a hellish planet, then you come back. So we just keep rotating like that. So it's not inevitable, we keep progressing upwards. If we're intelligent, we can try to do that and get up to Brahmaloka and then go to Vaikuntha or whatever, but it's not an inevitable thing. We go up, we go down, or we just stay on Earth and we get all sorts of human bodies, or then, if we're lucky, otherwise we go to an animal species, then gradually we work our way up to human species. Then again we go down, and then we go up. So we wander in the material world on ignorance. We don't know where we're going actually, so we just go up and down kind of randomly.
Is there an infinite number of jivas?
More or less, yeah, uncountable. Yeah. And they're all eternal. Most are in the spiritual world, and we got some in the material world doing this.
New jivas, well, they're not being created.
No, but they may manifest from Mahavishnu at a certain time, and they weren't previously in the material world, or they may be for some time, but then they were taking a big rest and they didn't come up for a long time, and then they're coming out now after many, many universes or whatever were created and destroyed. Okay, Hare Krishna.
One last question. The Tulsi prayer describes committed
Yeah.
are destroyed, even the killing of a Brahmin.
Yeah.
So that's obviously a very, very simple activity, but it would also be an offence too, because a Brahmin is a saintly person. So sometimes by a simple activity, could we be accruing both sins and offences?
If the Brahman is a Vaishnava, then it's a problem. If he's not a Vaishnava, then it's a great sin. Huh? Of course, it's worse than a normal sin because it's a Brahman and he's higher than the other Varnas, etc., so it becomes a greater sin. But then bhakti, if done sincerely, then it cancels even that sin out. But if we say, well, I'll kill the Brahman and I'll go around Tulsi Devi 3 times and then I got rid of it, then that's aparad, because we're committing sin in the strength of the holy name, more or less. So then we can't take advantage of that to commit more sin.
Very last question, just a really short one. It's described that with Maharaj Bharat, even though with the whole pastime of the deer and how he fell down from his exalted position, I was wondering, I think you were mentioning that he was experiencing the results of offences, wasn't it?
Aparad.
Yeah,
Previous aparad.
Previous aparad.
Yeah.
So, how could, if we really, really want to attain love for Krishna and serve him purely, how do we become free from these aparads that maybe we're not even aware of this life?
Yeah, so we have to be careful as much as we can to prevent them. We don't know what happened in previous lifetimes, so that's difficult to do. All we can do is do more bhakti and then leave it up to Krishna. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.